but we don't really get nearly as much omega-3 as omega-6. And in this modern Western diet, we have to make an effort to get that in balance. Typically today you're getting 20 times more omega-6 than omega-3, and they really should be about 2 to 1.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 90, and my guest is Fallon Morell. Sally is the president of the Weston A Foundation. She's a popular speaker and author, and it's no wonder why. She is a fount of knowledge regarding what nourishing real foods we should be eating, and she knows the why behind it all. Today, we talk about principle number 8 of the Wise Traditions diet, how we need to strike the right balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. The human body is capable of producing all kinds of fatty acids, the ones it needs, except for omega-6 and omega-3 acids, which is why we need to get these from the food we eat. Traditional people groups were able to find the right balance between those two, and Sally explains how we can get that same ratio ourselves. She dispels myths and misconceptions and tells us the best sources to get the ideal ratio in our diet. Before we begin the conversation, we want to remind you that the Weston A Foundation has its annual conference coming up. It's the Wise Traditions Conference. This is no light and fluffy event. It is seriously a chance to geek out with the brilliant speakers and connect with positive, like-minded people in our community. So please come out. There are going to be 36 new speakers this year. All kinds of amazing topics will be touched on and fantastic food. So go to wisetraditions.org to register today while the early bird pricing is still in effect. And we also want to pause and thank our sponsor for this week's episode, New Trends Publishing, home of nourishing traditions and other amazing books on diet and health. Visit newtrendspublishing.com. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Sally.
Thank you, Hilda. It's always great to be back on the show.
Well, people have been asking for us to do another principle from the dietary principles of the Wise Traditions diet. We're on number 8 now.
Yes, number 8 is about the balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. And the funny thing is, of all of these principles, the one principle that's kind of out there in the public is this idea that you shouldn't have too much omega-6 in your diet. And I think that's kind of funny because, why of all these 11 principles would that be the one that appealed to the public in some way?
Right. People are really starting to wrap their heads around this omega-3, omega-6 balance. But I'm still trying to figure it out. So,
well, people have heard about it, but they don't understand it.
Exactly. So, it seems like the most complex principle to me.
It is. It's the most complicated, and yet it's the one that people have heard about. Okay, so when we talk about our fats, and a fatty acid is just a fat molecule. That's the name for a fat molecule. We have 2 kinds of polyunsaturated fat molecules. Now, these are the kinds of fat molecules that are very fragile. They're always liquid, and we need them in small amounts in our diets. And most people understand that there's 2 basic types. There's the omega-6 and the omega-3. Well, omega-6 is what we get a lot of in the Western diet. It's in all vegetable oils. It's also pretty high in nuts and seeds. But we're mainly getting this from the vegetable oils. So, for example, something like safflower oil could be almost 100% omega-6. Now, we need to have the omega-6 in balance with the omega-3. And where do we get omega-3s? Well, we get them from seafood. And we get them from green vegetables and egg yolks if they've been raised naturally. But we don't really get nearly as much omega-3 as omega-6. And in this modern Western diet, we have to make an effort to get that in balance. Typically today, you're getting 20 times more omega-6 than omega-3. And they really should be about 2 to 1. So what do you do about this?
Wait, I just want to back up. 2 to 1, you mean twice as much omega-3 as omega-6?
No, twice as much omega-6 as omega-3.
Okay, good. I'm glad I asked that question.
Okay. And we've kind of made an enemy out of omega-6 because, we're getting way too much of it. but it's still a very important one to have. You don't want to eliminate it completely.
What you don't want to have is a ratio of 10 to 1 or 100 to 1.
Exactly. And it's about 20 to 1 in the modern diet because we're getting all these vegetable oils. We're not getting enough seafood or organic egg yolks or organ meats. Organ meats are a good source of omega-3 also.
Okay.
So here's how you fix this.
Okay.
One is you just don't use commercial vegetable oils and don't eat anything that contains them. They are doing you no good for many, many reasons, and one of them is too much omega-6.
Haven't you done a series called The Oiling of America?
Yes.
And in this, you address the fact that those fats are hurting us much more than we know.
They are the worst thing in the modern diet. Sugar's bad, yes. All the additives are bad, of course. Genetically modified seeds are bad. But the very worst thing, the thing that's causing the most disease and the most suffering, is the industrial seed oils. Mm-hmm. And one reason they cause a lot of suffering is because they're extremely high in omega-6.
Wow.
But another reason is they're just rancid, and they break down into free radicals and things called aldehydes, which are extremely reactive, cause the buildup of plaque in the arteries, cause cancer, interfere with growth in children. I mean, the list goes on.
And people don't know these things because you look at it on the shelf and it looks so pretty and yellow and clear, and
it smells clean,
and it has names like healthy oil and pure oil, and
American Heart Association approved. Yes. Unfortunately, this is the number one enemy in the diet.
Wow.
So we need to eliminate all these oils. That will get rid of the surplus of omega-6. And we need to make sure we're getting some omega-3. Mm-hmm. And we get that from seafood. We get it from cod liver oil. We get it from egg yolks of chickens raised outside. Liver, organ meats. We get it from butter. Butter actually has a perfect balance of omega-6 and omega-3.
Of course.
2 to 1. But what's happened today, Hilda, you know how Americans are. They always overdo things.
Yes.
And so people are taking lots of fish oil, getting lots of omega-3, eliminating the vegetable oils, and what we have now is some people, doing a lot of flax oil, which is omega-3. Canola oil has a lot of omega-3. And so now we have, in some cases, people getting too much omega-3.
This is why it's confusing to me. I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah. Chris Masterjohn wrote a wonderful article talking about the differences. So, what you would expect to see if you have too much omega-6 and what you would expect to see if you have too much omega-3.
Oh, okay.
So if you have too much omega-6, you're going to see a lot of inflammation. He has a whole list of skin problems and things this. Joint pain, yes, arthritis. If you have too much omega-3, you have digestive disorders. You also have skin problems. You'll have very dry skin. So you definitely need both the omega-3 and the omega-6.
In the right balance.
In the right balance. Now, if you are eating according to our principles, not taking fish oil, taking a little bit of cod liver oil, but not overdosing on all this fish oil, not using the vegetable oils, you'll be okay. You'll have the right balance, and you don't really have to worry about it too much.
Phew. But you know what? I'm going to put a link in the show notes to this article that you've referenced by Chris Masterjohn.
It's called Precious Yet Perilous. It's a wonderful title because these omega-3s and omega-6s are precious. We absolutely need them in small amounts, not large amounts. And they are perilous because if they're the wrong ratio or if we have too much of either of them, they can really cause a lot of health problems.
Now, when Dr. Price was doing his world tour and recording things as the researcher and scientist that he was, in addition to being a dentist, did he note these omega-6 and omega-3 balances, or it's something that we came upon later?
They really hadn't even been discovered in Dr. Price's day. This came later in the 40s and 50s, and Dr. Price had pretty much finished up his work by then. Mm-hmm. One thing I will say, the animal fats are all terrific for getting the right balance. Whether it's beef fat, lard, butter, they're all really, really good for this balance. They have a small amount of each, and if the animals are raised outside, they'll have some omega-3 in them.
I love how eating this way, like I don't have to understand all the science or wrap my mind around the omega-3, omega-6s, but if I eat according to these principles and the Wise Traditions diet, I'm going to be fine.
Exactly. Now, there is a little bit of a complicating factor here. So we have what they call the parent omega-3 and the parent omega-6. These are both 18 carbons long. But there are longer versions and more unsaturated versions. And people have heard about DHA and EPA.
Yes.
Okay. These are types of omega-3 that are actually much longer, more fragile, and they're in fish oils. Okay. And we need them in very small amounts. They're very important for neurological function, lots of things. But there's also a special omega-6 that's longer and more unsaturated, and that's called arachidonic acid. And we get that from butter, animal fats. Basically from animal fats is the only dietary source of arachidonic acid. And without arachidonic acid, you're going to have a lot of problems, skin problems and digestive problems for sure.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've heard of this arachidonic acid,
yeah.
but it always makes me think of an arachnid, like a spider or something.
Well, yeah, it's actually named, it comes from the root of the word for peanut.
Oh, really?
Because there's this kind of fatty acid in peanuts. It's 20 carbons long, so that's where it comes from.
But we do need it, is what you're saying.
We definitely need this. And again, if you eat animal fats like our ancestors did, if you eat egg yolks, if you eat organ meats and butter, you're getting your arachidonic acid. You don't have to worry about it.
Is there a problem if you get too much?
I think it'd be very hard to get too much arachidonic acid because there's just not a lot of it in our food. So I don't think that's a problem. But I do think there's a problem with people getting too much EPA and DHA because they're taking fish oils or flax. Well, not flax oil doesn't have that in it, but definitely the fish oils.
And I think a lot of people are taking fish oil because they hear cod liver oil is good for you, so they think fish oil, cod liver oil, it's all the same thing.
Exactly, and it's not the same thing, especially the brands of cod liver oil that we recommend. These have not been heated, and they're safe, and they have all the natural vitamins. Fish oil is a product of the fishing industry. They're highly processed. They're heated to 230 degrees and boiled for hours, and these are your very fragile omega-3s. And we just don't recommend them. They're very rancid. Even if they're in a capsule and they look and smell fresh, they are rancid.
Oh, goodness. How much cod liver oil should a person take?
Well, again, because there's a lot of omega-3 in cod liver oil, you don't want to take too much. You want to make sure it's a cod liver oil that has not been heated, so those omega-3s are not broken down. So our recommendation is 1 to 2 teaspoons a day, and that must be balanced by getting enough omega-6 in your diet. So that means that you're eating animal fats, you're eating grains and other normal foods.
Right.
And you'll get those omega-6s if you do that.
I know that I take butter when I have my cod liver oil, so that
excellent
probably is a help in that regard.
Yes.
Also, I wanted to ask you, I was thinking about how someone said if you get conventional meat that is not grass-fed and it's probably got antibiotics and hormones and things like that in it, the balance of omega-3 and omega-6s in that meat is different than the meat that's pastured.
Okay.
Is that true?
Here's another huge misconception, and it started off in the early days with this marketing campaign for grass-fed meat. And they said, eat this grass-fed meat because it'll be much higher in omega-3. And I remember I was actually at a debate. This was almost 20 years ago. And I had worked with Mary Enig, and I just knew that this was not true. In all beef fat, the amount of omega-3 and omega-6 is very small. It's not more than 1% of the total fat. So it's not an issue, really. What happens when you grain-fed meat, you get a little bit less omega-3, but you get a lot more monounsaturated. That's what's in fat. If you're, as a person, gaining weight, gaining fat, you're gaining monounsaturated, the kind of fat that's in olive oil. When you feed grains to animals, that's what increases in their fat. The amount of omega-6 and omega-3 is always very small. usually less than 1%.
Small enough to be negligible, I would say.
Yes. And what I said in this debate, I said, why are we grass feeding? So we get all these wonderful vitamins in the fat and more minerals in the fat. And they were saying, well, grass-fed is good because it's lean and there's more omega-3. I said, the goodness is in the fat. You want more fat. And what happened was people would eat this lean grass-fed meat and they wouldn't like it. And it was tough. And I think in the end, it really hurt the grass-fed movement, whereas the grass-feeding people should have been looking at how do we make this grass-fed meat fat so it tastes good and it's delicious and you get the benefits of all the extra vitamins that are in the fat.
So that misconception came from maybe a marketing push that was unsuccessful, actually.
It was not really based on science, but they thought that's what would appeal to the public.
Mm-hmm. So, Sally, I want to wrap my head around some of this science. Let's talk about the conversions of the omega-3 and omega-6 to the long form.
Okay, right. So we've got your omega-3, it's 18 carbons long, and it can be longer and more unsaturated till we get the EPA and DHA, which I think one of them is 22 carbons long. And then we have your omega-6. It's 18 carbons long, but it can be converted into the longer form, which is arachidonic acid. Now, some people can actually do that very well themselves. So they could be eating some almonds and get some omega-6 from the almonds, and they could turn that into arachidonic acid. Some people can get some omega-3, say, from flax oil, and they're good converters, and they could make EPA and DHA out of it. But in principle, human beings don't do that very well.
Okay.
And especially if we have any health problems. If we're eating too many carbs, for example, it's hard to make that conversion. If we're missing vitamin B6, we can't make that conversion. If we have too much omega-6, we won't make the conversions in omega-3. And if we have too much omega-3, we won't make the conversions in omega-6. I wrote an article about this, trying to sort out the science.
Yeah.
It's called Tripping Lightly Down the Prostaglandin Pathways. That's on our website.
A catchy title.
So again, everybody's different, but for example, I suspect that certain groups, for example, in Africa and India, these people have a long time on their same traditional diet.
Yes.
I suspect that these people are good converters. Whereas in the West, we have had many generations of poor diet, too many carbs. Alcohol can affect this. Being too thin or being too fat can affect this. So there's just a lot of problems that affect our ability to make these longer versions that we need. We really need them to be healthy. So again, this is where the grass feeding comes in. You eat an egg yolk from a grass pastured chicken. It's going to have that arachidonic acid in it. It's going to have the DHA in it. All ready made for you.
All set for me.
Yeah.
But is there any way for a person to go from a poor converter to a better converter?
Yes, getting your health better, getting a better balance of omega-6 and omega-3, getting your weight right. If you were drinking a lot of alcohol, cutting back on that, cutting back on sugar, getting more zinc in the diet. Zinc is really critical for this. So yes, there are lots of things you can do.
And when your balance is right, tell me some of the health benefits we can expect.
Well, you can expect a nice skin, easy digestion, keen mind, no brain fog.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. One of the things I think is really neat is that a lot of the food combinations that we like will combine omega-6 and omega-3. So, for example, smoked salmon and sour cream, or caviar and sour cream. You'll get the omega-3 in the salmon or the caviar and the omega-6 in the cream. Another one is liver and bacon, or liver cooked in lard. You'll get the omega-3s in the liver and you'll get the omega-6s in the lard. So there's a lot of really nice food combinations that we think, gosh, this goes together very well. Like butter on spinach, for example. Get omega-6 and omega-3. So I think that's kind of neat. These things that taste really good together are also giving us a nice balance.
I love that. So something we're craving might be because it's giving us just the right balance of those things.
Yes, or some typical food combination is one that gives us a nice balance of omega-6 and omega-3.
What about, I'm thinking about how you were talking about egg yolks. What about like egg salad? Because you've got the creaminess and the mayonnaise that might have, would that be a good balance?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there you go.
Ding, ding. Coming up, do grains offer omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids? Sally talks about their essential fatty acid content and their role in our diet. We want to pause now and thank this week's sponsor, New Trends Publishing. Have you seen the Nourishing Traditions cookbook for children? The kids in your family are going to love this spiral-bound, fully illustrated version of Nourishing Traditions. They'll learn to make everything from crispy nuts to friendly ferments. It's available at bookstores, online booksellers, and of course at newtrendspublishing.com. Hey, and if you decide to go big, keep in mind that case orders are 50% off at newtrendspublishing.com. And don't forget to join us at the Wise Traditions Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota this November, the 10th through the 13th. It's an amazing event that has a strong educational focus. There are 36 new speakers covering topics including recovery from adrenal fatigue, combating migraines, and overcoming PCOS. I just can't get over the variety of subjects that are presented, and there's often an opportunity to connect with speakers personally. I'm going to be there, Sally's going to be there, and many, many more people. So why don't you join us and take your health to new heights? Go to wisetraditions.org to register today. Okay, so this is making me a little bit hungry, this conversation. But I also wanted to ask you about grains. What is the role of grains? Do they offer omega-3s or omega-6s?
Some grains do. Flaxseed is very high in omega-3, and the flaxseed oil was considered very healthy in places like Russia, Scandinavia, where they ground the flaxseed to get the oil. Wheat is got a lot of omega-3, and wheat, we've made a kind of villain out of wheat, and for many people it is a villain. But in the old ancient times, wheat was the best grain. It was considered the best grain, the most spiritual grain. And that's because there was a lot of omega-3 in the wheat. Walnuts are full of omega-3, not full of omega-3, but they have a higher content than most. That's why when you have walnut oil, you keep it in the fridge because the omega-3 breaks down very easily. That's why walnuts will go rancid easily.
Yes, I've noticed
that. You keep your walnuts in the freezer. So, yes, there were some plant sources of omega-3 for sure.
Interesting. And should we combine those with other foods?
Well, of course, you put butter on everything. And now, an interesting oil is rapeseed oil, which we call canola oil today. And canola oil has about 10% omega-3. And it was used as a marketing tool. Say this canola oil, we're going to aim it at the upscale market, health-conscious market, because it's got a lot of omega-3. And it's very low in saturated fat. But when they fed the canola oil to animals, they developed a lot of problems.
Wow.
It's too low in saturated fat. And the other problem is that because canola oil is so highly processed, like all of these oils, lots of heat. These oils are heated at least 5 times.
Oh, my goodness.
Before they go into the bottle. Those fragile omega-3s break down. And so you've got a lot of breakdown products in the canola oil.
So people think they're ingesting a really great oil or putting it on their salad, and they're really...
Yeah, I mean, now, for example, in India and China, they had these people who came around, they had a stone press. Usually they had a little donkey pulling this stone press, and they would put the flax seeds in there and grind them, or the rapeseed, and it was consumed right there immediately, so it was fresh. But that's not what we do, of course. We are highly processing these in horrendous ways.
Well, it reminds me of raw milk, that raw milk and pasteurized milk are 2 very different products.
That's exactly right.
So the same with this canola.
Same with the oils, same with the canola oil, yes.
Well, so we're beginning to wrap up now, and I have to ask you the question I often ask my guests. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, and I guess in this case it would be related to omega-3s and omega-6s, what would you say that they should do?
Well, I would say don't take fish oil. I'm very concerned with this big push to have everybody take fish oil, and people who think they're doing the healthy thing are taking fish oil.
Right.
And that would be my one piece of advice. I mean, I've already advised everyone to eat plenty of butter.
Yes.
And to take cod liver oil in small amounts, because there you're getting the A and D. But I really would warn people about fish oils.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sally.
Thanks, Hilda.
My guest today was Sally Fallon Morell. For more on Sally and the Weston A. Price Foundation, go to their website, westonaprice.org. For highlights from today's episode and resources mentioned, go to the podcast page and click on the show notes for episode 90. And a huge thank you to Podcast Village for allowing us to use your studio and your excellent staff that know exactly what they're doing. They are so good at producing and promoting podcasts. Check them out at podcastvillage.com. Hey, and I want to let you guys know something special. Sally is going to teach a master cooking class at the upcoming conference in Minneapolis this November. To be honest, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I don't think she's done it before. I don't know if she'll do it again. So carve the time out of your schedule and plan on coming to this class. Even if you can't come for the whole conference, just come for this on Monday the 13th. You will be so glad you did. Go to wisetraditions.org to register for this unique event, and I hope to see you there.
Did you know that there are Weston A. Price Foundation chapters all over the U.S. and around the world? Chapter leaders help you find good food in your area, and some have meetings you can attend. Go to our website, westonaprice.org, and click on Find a Local Chapter to see if there is one near you. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.